Hello, my name's Alex P. Twigg, and I'm going to be taking you through a basic tutorial in 3D Studio Max. Now, this is basic in terms of it's going to be assuming you have no prior knowledge of 3D Studio Max, but it is going to take you through some pretty good techniques to get some nice final images like the one you see here. So this is really simple to make. There's no modeling involved particularly or anything like that. It's something, if you've never used Max before, you are going to be able to complete this tutorial. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just reset 3D Studio Max so it's the same as it would be for you coming in. And click there, set. Okay, so I'm just going to restart Max now, so it's a blank slate. While that's going, I'm just going to direct you to this one of these websites here. I did a Google search for HDRI Probe free, and through this link here, and then clicking on the link to find the images, I got to this site here, where I can download some free HDRI light probes. Don't worry too much about what those are yet, but you might want to go and have a look at them. Okay, so here we are in 3D Studio Max, and if you've not used it before, it might seem a bit intimidating because there's a lot going on. You've got menu bars and tabs and all kinds of stuff. Don't worry, I'll show you everything that you need to know as we're going through it. Okay, so the first thing and the main feature of 3D Studio Max when you open it is these 4 windows here. Now these are a representation of 3D space. 3 of them are essentially a 2D view, so the top one, the front one, and the left one are 2-dimensional essentially. And this perspective view down here is a 3D view, so I can navigate around that in 3 dimensions. You can do a similar thing in these views here, but it doesn't work particularly well. I'd usually advise you to not do that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to jump right in, and we're going to create a plane. Now I'm going to create this from these tabs over here. You'll notice that you can cycle through these, and each one has different options and settings on. The first one we're going to use is the Create tab. The Create tab has some subheadings, and we just want to be in this geometry section and standard primitives. Now, a primitive, if I just draw one out for you, there you go. That is just a very basic shape that 3D Studio Max has stored in its memory as a program, basically. What it does, it gives a very good way to demonstrate the nature of the different views. Okay, so here in the front view and the left view, all we can see is a white line, which represents the sides of the plane we've created. The top view shows a white grid, which shows the very top perspective of our plane. And this 3D view, the perspective view, shows us all the dimensions, and we can navigate and look at that in different ways. Now, there's different ways of moving your camera view around in all of the various viewports. The one you'll navigate around mostly is in the perspective view, and let's go through some of the different ways to navigate. The first one is using your middle mouse button. You can just drag the screen around and move things from left to right and up and down. The next thing you might want to do is you might want to rotate around things, so holding the left Alt key and then the middle mouse button, now I can start to rotate my view around things. What happens sometimes is you might sort of go off center, so you can't see what you've got selected, and I can't quite do that. A really handy keyboard shortcut that centers your camera on this object that you have selected is Z. So if I press Z now, it recenters all my views on that object, and now when I rotate round, it's perfectly around that object. Okay, let's go and introduce another primitive object in here. Let's introduce a teapot. Now you're going to see, if you're just starting out in 3D, you're probably going to see a lot of teapots. The reason for that is it's a primitive shape, so it's something that's generated within the computer, but it's quite complex in that it's not a regular shape. You can using these tabs here, you can generate spheres and cylinders and pyramids and all sorts. But the teapot has some unusual geometry that's not regular, which means that it shows better examples of how your lighting's going to work and reflections work and things like that. So it's just a more useful shape to be looking at. Now you saw there that I snapped my view onto the center of this teapot, and that again was with Z. If you want to select a different item, so if I wanted to select the plane again, all it is just a left click. Except it's not doing it now for me. That's okay. There is a reason it's not doing it now for me. The reason it's not doing it now for me is I'm still in this teapot create mode. So if I'm trying to click here and it's not doing anything, but if I were to click and drag, it would drag out another teapot. To correct this, what I need to do is I need to choose my select tool, which is this tool up here, select object. And then I can click, and if I press Z, snap to that object, click on the teapot, click Z, and it frames that object up for you. Now this select tool, you can select it if I just click on the teapots again, so you can see that I'm in that mode now. To the keyboard shortcut to go to your select tool is the letter Q on the keyboard. So that's how immediately to go to your select tool. Now I'm not happy with the size of this plane because it's not quite big enough relative to my teapot in my opinion. So I want to make it bigger. Now I'm going to use a tool called the scale tool, which is found just here, select and uniform scale. You can get to it by just clicking that, but if I press Q to go to my select mode, I can use the keyboard shortcut R to go to that, and then I can scale it up and scale it down. Now let's just go into a bit more detail about the scale tool. I'll show you on the teapot, and what I'm going to do to show this better is I'm going to make this camera view the full screen. So I'm going to get rid of these three views and just focus on this perspective. I'm going to press Alt and W to maximize that view. You can go backwards and forwards between the two, just Alt W to switch, but now I'm just focusing on this one view. Okay, so press R to have a look at the scale tool. Now you've got these, the way this tool operates is you've got these three lines which represent the three spatial dimensions that this object occupies, and you can grab any one of those lines and drag it out and it stretches it along that dimension. So you've got length, depth, and then finally height. So you can squash it up and down. Okay, next you've got these outer bars here. Now what they're doing, look, they're connecting two of the dimensions. So this bottom bar here connects the X and the Y. This side bar here connects the Z and the X. And this side bar here connects the the Z and the Y. So by dragging on one of those, I'm dragging in two dimensions now, so it's getting big and fat in both dimensions. I can make it tall and wide, I can make it tall and deep. There we go. If you want to scale it up so all the dimensions increase, so it just gets entirely bigger or smaller, you grab this center triangle. Look, all the axes now are highlighted, and you can make it smaller and bigger. Now one good thing about Max is you can keep going down and your cursor will come back along the top of your screen. So down, 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 and it's still there. When I let go, the scale tool resizes, so it's always the same size relative to your screen. If I were to zoom out, it's still relative to your screen the same size. Now I think that teapot might be a bit small, so I'm just going to scale that back up now. There we go, around about a bit smaller. There we go. That size. So that is the scale tool. Now if you were already on the scale tool and you keep pressing R, just watch this box. It cycles through different modes that you can have on this tool. So if I press R and just put my cursor on, you see it's select and non-uniform scale. So they just do slightly different things. It's worth keeping an eye on it. The one that often confuses is when you're on select and squash. So if I were to push that down in Z, it squashes it out in the other dimension. So it kind of tries to maintain the volume of the shape. And if you don't know that that happens, it can really confuse you. So R one more time, and it's select and uniform scale. Okay, so the next tool we can have a look at is if I press W, it selects the Move tool. The Move tool is a lot simpler than the Scale tool. If I press W a couple of more times, it's not going to change. Move is move, there's nothing else to know. And it's just exactly the same. You know, I can move it in individual directions, or I can highlight one of these planes and move it along 2 dimensions. So if I want to move this teapot to this corner of the plane, I can either do a move along X and then a move along Y, or I can just grab this central point and just move it along, and I know it's not going to rise above the plane there. Okay, and the last one you might want to have a look at is if you press E, you get the Rotate tool. So now I can grab one of these axes and just drag it round and rotate it in all the different directions. If you get to a point where, oh no, look at that, it's totally in the wrong position and I can't get it back, what you have down at the bottom here are numerical tabs, which mean you can set an absolute value for any of these options. So here in the rotate mode, I want to set all these 3 values in the X, Y, and Z back to 0. So I press 0, tab, 0, tab, and 0. And it's back how it started. That's its original pose there. So same thing. If I'm in the Move tool, look, you can see it's not exactly on 0. You might want to have it exactly on 0. So you can do that. Or you might want to change the scale. There we go. So at the moment it's got a scale of 68.669. I want that to be exactly 70, so it gives you real precision to work with there. Pressing R again. So now we're in the non-uniform scale, and it's opened up all the options here. So before, when it's in uniform scale, I can only change one, and it changes them all together, which is different to in this window, where I can change them individually. But if I'm in non-uniform scale, I can numerically change all of them together. So it's a useful little thing to know. Okay, the last thing I want to do is I want to create a back wall for this scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my select tool. Just watch your select tool. It's got multiple options here. You can see it's got a marquee drag, and it's got circular, and it's got various options. I tend to use just a rectangular or maybe a little looper to select things. Just click something and you have got it selected. I'm going to duplicate this now as a copy. So commonly copy is Control C, but it's not in this. What is Control V. So you've already got it selected, you just need to paste it in essentially now. So Control V, and it brings up this dialog telling me how I want to clone it, and I want it as a copy. Just ignore these for now, you don't need to worry about them at the moment. Click OK, and it has cloned it, but it's in exactly the same position. The way to see where it is, I'm going to press E to bring up my rotate tool, and then I'm going to start turning it, and there you can see that we now have 2 planes. But I want this to be perfectly vertical. You can see it gives you an angle at the top there, and you might fiddle for ages to position it, or you can just come here and you can say I want this at 90 degrees, so negative 90, negative 90, and enter. There we go. And I just want to move this back a bit so it's not cutting the teapot in 2. There we go. That'll do nicely. And a final little adjustment, so I'm going to select my teapot and go into rotate mode and just turn it a little bit so it's at a slightly more interesting angle there. Okay, that's going to be the end of this first tutorial. We're going to continue setting up the scene in the next video, but what you've learnt here is you've learnt the basic commands of how to navigate in the windows. You've learnt all the different camera movement tools there, and how to frame up an object using the key Z. You've learned how to minimize and maximize your windows using Alt and W, and that does work in any viewport. You've learned how to create basic objects or primitives using these buttons here, and you've learned how to move those objects in 3D space using the Move, Rotate, and Scale tools. Okay, in the next scene we're going to have a look at how to render your image, so that's how to produce your final image, and then how to make that image look better. This will include things like shadows and reflections. So hope to see you in the next video. Thank you very much.